Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to the Project Reinvented podcast, and I'm your host, Lachlan John McRae. And today's episode is going to be slightly different. I'm not going to have a guest today. I'm going to share my own story of reinvention because, believe it or not, yes, I have one. And I'm not going to go through my whole life story. I'm actually going to share about my relationship with drugs and alcohol and overcoming addiction, because people often ask, how did you do it? How did you overcome, alcohol and drugs? And the truthful answer is, I don't have a definite answer. I have a very strange and unique story, which I will share today. And hopefully this can shed some light on the topic. It can help someone in some kind of way. Because normally when people have problems with drugs and alcohol, or they're an addict or problems with addiction, a lot of times you hear there was childhood trauma, that they had a family, where alcoholics and, addicts were in the family. In my case, that wasn't true. I came from a very loving family. My mother is the most amazing mother I could ever ask for. My father's a great father also. I have no addicts in my family, no history of addiction in the family. So it was, it was very strange. Now, when I don't recall a lot of my childhood, up until the age of, I would say, 8 or 9, I don't really have that many memories. Now, my parents divorced when I was 4, or 4 or 5, I don't actually remember. So I don't remember my father living with me. Now, the earliest memory I do have is actually going to visit my father in his house that he had, and this was in South Africa. And I remember it because we were in the back garden and my brother and I came across a scorpion. And this was in South Africa because I was born in South Africa, went back to the UK, my brother was born, and then we went back to Africa. And my parents got divorced, and my mum met my now stepdad, Dave, who, I'm so blessed to have him in my life. I love him. And that's the thing. My parents divorced, yeah. But out of that, I've got two amazing families. I have my mum and my stepdad, Dave, and then my dad and my stepmom, Pauline. Now, Pauline's an amazing woman. Dave's an amazing guy. And I'm so blessed to have them in my life. So I feel like I have benefited from that. But anyway, so when I was, the memories I do have in South Africa were always happy memories. I remember just before we left, we had this lovely house. My mum, my brother, myself, and Dave lived in this house. It was quite a nice big house, and I have these fond memories of living in South Africa. And then my mum, my brother, and myself, we moved back to Scotland, and Dave stayed behind. And we moved in with my grandparents, and we moved into a council estate, which was quite rough, so it was a bit of a culture shock for me. My brother and I had this funny accent. We're into a council estate. So you could imagine it was quite, it wasn't fun anyway, because people made fun of our accents. My brother was younger, so there was often I was in fights quite a lot. But yeah, so my grandparents were super amazing, loving people. We had such a close family, lots of cousins, uncles. So I never felt like I was hard done by or anything. And then when Dave moved back, we got our own place, and, we lived like a family. So my earliest memories were always, around my cousins, my grandparents, and, there was no kind of trauma in my life. There was nothing you could say that, this is why I became an alcoholic or an addict. So it was, for me, it was very, I can't pinpoint it. So there's nothing I can say that's the reason why. But I was always big into football. I loved football. And, I was a normal kid in school. I got into trouble in school. I was a bit of a class clown, a show off. And now looking back, I can see that I was quite insecure, and I was always, putting on masks and, trying to be that funny guy. And, I was doing silly things in class, always getting into trouble, got suspended a few times, get kicked out of school. But I wasn't a bad kid. I was just a normal boy, who would get into trouble, like most of us do. And so I didn't start drinking till later. I started drinking at 15, and I was one of the last one of my friends to start drinking because, as I said, I was big into football, and I was actually playing with a youth pro team, Partick Thistle. So I wasn't really into drinking. My friends were all drinking, And what had happened was I moved to America to live with my dad to try it out. I went over one summer and I worked on a building site with him because he was trying to deter me from, working on a building site. And that's the thing. My dad moved to America when I was about 8, and that's when he met Pauline and remarried. And that's the thing. I used to go over there for 6 weeks at a time, go to Disneyland. So I'd actually had, a great childhood, I would say. But anyway, so I went there when I was 13. I went over for the summer. We were living in Queens. I loved it. So I said I want to, go back and move over there and see what life is like there. So when I was 14, at this point my football career had kind of taken off. Scouts were watching me. I was getting recognition, and so I went over to America, and I hated it because my dad had moved to Florida. None of my friends from New York were there, and I hated it. I was in school there, and I felt lonely. I missed my mum, I missed my brother, I missed Dave, and I wanted to come back home. So it didn't last long. And I was 14. By the time I came back, I was 15. And my friends had all started drinking, and it wasn't something that I was participating in. I signed for Partick Thistle, so I was kind of focusing on my football. But then things with Partick Thistle didn't work out. And, I was hanging around at the park at weekends, as you do. So eventually, I wouldn't say I got talked into drinking. Eventually, I agreed to have a drink of alcohol. And, I was quite a boisterous kid. I would get into trouble, but I wasn't bad. I wasn't a bad egg, or I wasn't a bad boy. And, when I wouldn't say super confident. I like talking to girls and stuff like that. I was quite shy in that sense. And I got my first girlfriend when I was 15, and I started drinking. Now, see, when I found alcohol, it was at that time I remember thinking, "Wow, this is amazing." I loved it. I loved the feeling it gave me. It brought me out my shell. I could go to the nightclubs. Well, we had under 18 nightclubs, and it really, my inhibitions went away, and it was a feeling. I loved the feeling. I'm not going to kind of sit here and say I didn't. So I started off drinking on a Saturday night because I had football and I was football training. And, at that age, gangs were around in Glasgow, and, I hadn't been involved with it before. But as I started drinking, I started hanging about with different people. The drinking started to progress. So it went from a Saturday night to a Friday, Saturday night to a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night to a Tuesday, Thursday. And I started experimenting with other things, marijuana, speed, acid. So you could start to see I was progressing on my addiction ladder. And, I had my girlfriend at the time. It was the first serious relationship I had. And I started kind of getting involved with street gangs, and started to get in a bit more trouble. And this was the thing. I'd never been in trouble in my life when I was sober because I wasn't that type of person. But see, when I drank, I started to become somebody different. I started to change. And where we lived, reputation was a big thing. If you were feared or you had a reputation, it was something to be proud of. And when I started getting involved in, gangs and stuff, I wanted that reputation. And the reason being was because I wasn't a bad boy. I wasn't a tough guy. But alcohol gave me the ability to seem like I was. So I started getting into trouble, and eventually I got arrested. When I was 16, I got my first arrest, and it was quite a serious one. I spent the weekend in jail. I was in the Sunday papers. Like, we have the Sunday Mail. I was in the paper on the Sunday, and my mum was scared. I was in the jail cell. Obviously, I was scared, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So I was drunk when that happened, and you would have thought that might have given me a wee wake up call. But it didn't, because it just enhanced my reputation, because people knew this was me that done it. I was in the paper for it. And, my ego started to get bigger and bigger. And that was just the start of a long run, So at that point there, I was 16. The alcohol started to become more frequent. I was experimenting with more drugs. And then I broke up with my girlfriend. And at the time, I didn't care right initially. I was messing about with other girls. But as time went, I started to want her back, and she'd had enough. She said no. But that rejection destroyed me. I couldn't deal with it. I remember crying. I remember crying to my dad, my stepdad, wanting her back, and she didn't want me back, and I couldn't deal with it. So this sent me on my first kind of spiral of depression. I started drinking every single night, and I started getting into more trouble, started doing more drugs, and then I found ecstasy, and ecstasy was another, drug that I just, loved. I really did. And by this point, my football had started to kind of die down because I wasn't so much interested in the football anymore. I was interested in, drinking and taking drugs and partying on the weekends. And that was what my life consisted of. I didn't really care about anything. I just wanted to numb how I felt, because the reality was I wasn't comfortable in my own skin, and drinking alcohol gave me the ability to get through life. So, I wouldn't say alcohol was the issue. Alcohol gave me the ability to live. At the time, it seemed like it worked to help me be social, to help me go out, help me do things. But it started to becoming progressively worse and worse. And I was getting into trouble with the police more. And eventually the courts ordered me to go and see a therapist, an alcohol therapist. So I went to her, and I lied. She asked me what I was drinking. I just told her, a fraction of what I really was. And even at that, she was gobsmacked. She's like, a boy your age is drinking that much? And the reality was I lied. I was actually drinking a lot more. But yeah, so I would just say what she wanted to hear, and I got through that. And then I picked up a really serious charge. And by this point here, my criminal record was starting to build up. I had quite a few convictions for knives, for an assault, for breach of the peace. And this was a massive case. It was a judge and jury case. And I remember going to church and saying, I never went to church, but I remember saying, please God, let me get out of this. And I promise I'll change my ways. I promise I'll stop drinking. And so it went to court. It was a 7-day trial with, as I said, the judge and jury. And it was me and my best friend were standing trial. And my lawyer said to me, listen, I'm expecting you're going to be getting 2 to 3 years here. And so at this point here, I thought I was going to prison, and I was devastated. I really was scared. And it came to the end of it, and I got what's called a not proven verdict, which means that they couldn't prove that I was guilty, and there was doubts if I wasn't. But anyway, in Scotland's the only country to have this, I think, and I got a not proven. So I did. I walked free from the court. I had no jail time. I had no criminal record, no additional criminal record. And, this would have been a prime time for me to take stock of my life and evaluate it. But I didn't. The first thing I done was go and get hammered. I went and celebrated. I got drunk, and I just continued the same behaviour. Then I ended up in court again. And this time I actually done nothing wrong. I was just walking around after a Rangers Celtic game with my friend, and I got arrested again, put in the back of the meat wagon, as we call them here in Scotland. I got took to the cells. My friend got released after a couple of hours. I got kept in, which I found quite strange. But I went to the district court the next day, and because I was out on bail for 3 other things. So I still had 3 charges against me. And then this was the 4th one. So they decided to remand me, which is they sent me to the young offenders. And so I got what's called a fully committal, which was 110 days until my court case. So I had to go to the young offenders there. But because the charge was a breach of the peace, it wasn't a serious charge. I had a good lawyer, and he got me what's called high court bail. So I think I only spent 3 or 4 weeks actually in there, and I was released. And again, I know at no point had I questioned that I had a problem with alcohol. Now, everyone else could see that I had a problem with alcohol. At this point here, I'd been stabbed, I had been slashed in the face, and I'm not innocent. I was doing just as much or worse to other people. I thought I was this tough guy, and the reality was I wasn't a tough guy. I could only be tough when I was drinking, because what I was doing, I was hiding who I was inside, and alcohol gave me the ability to portray I was somebody else. So it was like a coping mechanism. And I was this actual scared little boy inside, but I was portraying to be this tough guy. So, and yeah, so I got out on high court bail, and you would have thought this is a prime time to kind of check your life out. I didn't. I continued the same behaviours. I just was partying non-stop. My family, my mother was getting worried. My mother was worried sick at this time. My dad was worried sick. My dad came to visit, and I remember when he came to visit, he took me to a Rangers Celtic game. I actually got arrested at the game. I was in the holding cells, and he wrote me a note. I remember the note, and he said, "If you continue this way of living, there's only one direction you're going." And there was an arrow pointing down. And this was him just visiting from America. So I never got to see him. I spent the night in jail, got back out, but my dad was already gone at this time. And not to mention, I also got caught drunk driving. I got my license for 1 month, and I was caught drunk driving. So I got my license taken off me for a year. So there was all these things, and the one common denominator was alcohol and drugs. These were the common denominator, but I couldn't see that because there was no part of me that ever believed that I was an alcoholic, because I thought alcoholics were these people you see on streets with no clothes, or I thought, I was never an alcoholic. There was no way I could be one. And the reality was, I was an alcoholic, I just didn't know it. But as life would go, I had no real vision for my life. I went to college. I was an apprentice mechanic. I walked out of the job because I'd been on a bender the night before. Went in, it was rough. I was angry. Argued with the boss. Walked out and lost that job. And I only had 6 months until my apprenticeship was finished. So I ended up going back to college and messed about in college, not really taking it serious. Done that for the first year. I got some credits, then I done it a second year, got some credits, and there was no real goal for my life. I didn't have a clear vision, and I was wandering about aimlessly. Just all I cared about was getting high. I lived for the weekend, and even at that, through the week, if I wasn't drinking, I was smoking weed. There was some type of substance that I had to have. I couldn't just be sitting myself. I couldn't just sit myself, and I didn't know enough about addiction to have any realization. I didn't know enough about myself. But anyway, I went back to college in a sports coaching course, and I was with the college. I was at this program one day, and I won the program. I bumped into a boy that I played football with years ago, and his name was Scott, and he was coaching people in America. So because I was on this sports coaching thing, and he was working for the SFA at the time, and I bumped into him and we got chatting, and he said that there could be a possibility I could go to America and coach. And because I'd lived in America, I had a green card. So for me, it was these guys, I could go over there. And because I had a green card, it made it easier for the people over there to employ me. So within a week, I spoke to him. And within a week, it was arranged that I was going to America to work. I was going to coaching. And, and this was a chance for me to have a fresh start, for me to go and really do something with my life. And I was all excited. So, could imagine I have this fresh opportunity. I'm going over here, then, I'm not going to continue the same behavior, am I? But anyway, I go over to America and nothing changes. Nothing changes. My behavior's still the same. I'm all I'm caring about is drinking. I'm partying quite a lot. And so I get into a bit of trouble within the first couple of weeks there because I'm drunk, and the people who had hired me, they sent me to Connecticut. I was in New York, and they sent me to Connecticut because I'd argued with some of the guys in the house, and it was either sack me or send me to Connecticut for a second chance. So they sent me to Connecticut, and I got on great with all these guys. But it was so we were working, coaching, doing camps, and the first real camp that we had to do, and it was it was like a summer camp. So I'd got there in the April, and this was us getting ready for the summer camp. So I think I'd been in the job about 5 or 6 weeks, and this has been me moved to Connecticut, and again, drinking and partying, and not got a clue about life, about anything. And we were going for training to get ready for the summer camp. So the first night we go there, the guys say, "Right, guys, we know you are going to go out and have a beer, but make sure you're back for 10 o'clock. The curfew is 10 o'clock. Don't let us down." And by this point, I'm actually drunk because I was drinking on the way there. So we go out, and all the guys are going back, and they're like, "Right, listen, it's time to go back." And I'm like, "Nah, I'm stayed out." I woke up, passed out in New York, and I had no idea where I was in this kind of alleyway, and it's like 9 in the morning. Now, we were supposed to be starting at 9 o'clock. So I get there late and immediately they just, they sack me on the spot and they get me sent back to Connecticut and I have to vacate the house that I'm living in. So I have nowhere to live. Um, no job. I'm in the middle of America. And lucky enough, my brother was over at the time. So my brother was working in New York and I went to stay with my brother. And, and at no point am I questioning, my behaviour or anything. My whole focus is getting stoned or drinking. And then one of my other buddies, he phones me and he says, listen, I'm getting a coaching opportunity. Do you want me to see if I can get you in? And this was for the whole summer. So I was like, yeah, go for it. So I ended up getting the job and, for the whole summer, I'm working on this camp and there was nowhere for us to get alcohol on this camp. So I was finding it very difficult and to just basically, and this is where I kind of often wonder, why wasn't I questioning it? Because I found it very difficult just to be me and just to sit with myself. And when we did get the opportunity on the weekends, I would go and I would party hard, and then it would be Monday to Friday. I was kind of in a state of kind of fear all the time, anxiety. And anyway, I got through the summer. I started then. And I got the opportunity to go to university because a guy had watched me play, and after it, he said, "Listen, would you fancy going to come in here at university? We'll set you up for classes. You can, and you'd be playing." So I got the opportunity to actually go to university and play football. And this was starting in the August time. So I'd worked all summer. And again, looking back, there's so many warning signs, but I didn't see them. And I started university, and this was just like my dream because now I had the free roll to party. So my behaviour was, outrageous as an understatement. I was drinking every single night. Now I'm supposed to be an athlete. We train every single day at 3 o'clock. I'm partying every single night, not taking anything seriously, missing classes, and it gets to the end of the year and I haven't performed anywhere close to my ability. I've been arrested 3 times on drunk and disorderly, uh, and I can't remember what the other one was. These were they call them campus police, where they have police officers that go around the campus, make sure that everybody behaves, and they had gave me, and it wasn't really arrest, I had been written up 3 times, and the coach had heard of this, and he said, you know what, I've had enough. I warned you before you came here to behave yourself, and so he cut me loose. And again, so I'm left, alcohol, my behaviour, everything has left me, with nothing to do, nowhere to go. So again, another opportunity comes up. I get to go and coach, and I go and coach at this other university, and one of my friends is on the team. So we get a flat together. We've moved away, and it's about an hour and a half away from where I had been based before. I've got a job at this point. I'm also coaching at night, and I'm coaching through the day. So my behaviour didn't change. It's the same old, drinking all the time. But now things are starting to kind of gradually get worse. I got arrested again, but this time I've been arrested for it was assault and robbery, but that's not what happened. It was actually self-defense, but I got a robbery charge and an assault charge, which is a felony in America. So this is this. I've went up to court, and they have said, so they give you a warning. So, and also I'd been caught drunk driving again. My first that the new year before it, I had been caught drunk driving. I had been given 15 classes that I had to participate, and I didn't lose my license. So this was again another appearance in court, and they give me probation. So I'm on probation, and as long as you don't commit another offence for a year, you don't have a criminal record. But if you commit another offence, then you come back up for the same charge. You get charged again, so you've got these 2 charges. So I end up getting in a bit of trouble again. I got charged for another assault. So now they bring these both charges up. So in the meantime, I came home to Scotland to visit my parents. So, well, my mum and my stepdad. And I come back, spend the Christmas time here, and then I go back. As I get back, they arrest me at the gate and they detain me. And basically, because I had committed a felony offence, my green card was void. So at this point here, I'm starting to freak out because I'm basically getting told that I'm going to get sent back home. Now I've got my house and my car and everything here, and at this point here, the guy who my one of my coaches, he contacts a lawyer, they get it sorted out, and I get released. But I'm still pending investigation, so I'm now released. I go up to court and I get a probation again. So now I'm on probation, and also I'm getting drug tested as well. And so I've got another year's probation here, and my behaviour again, I haven't changed at all. I'm still doing the exact same thing. I'm, you know, smoking weed, partying hard, just constantly drinking, and not thinking about consequences or anything. I was just such in a delusion. But anyway, as time goes, my behaviour continues. I crash my car when I'm kind of intoxicated. Thank God I never got breathalyzed. But there was all these things happening, and it was all every time something happened wrong, I was drunk. So eventually, I get arrested again. Now this morning, I have to go to this special unit thing to do a pee sample. So I go to this unit, I give them a pee sample, then I come back to court. And because I tested positive for cocaine, marijuana, and alcohol, they jailed me for a week. Now, it was $10,000 to get bail. And I got my friend to contact my dad, and my dad organised $10,000 to get me out. So I only spent 2 days in there, but I get out anyway. And the first thing I do is I go and party. But now the court has told me that I have to go to an outpatient rehab centre where I get tested every single week. I have to go 3 times a week. I get tested every single week. If I have a positive sample, then I'll be back to jail. And again, you would think at some point I would start to think, I've got a problem with alcohol here. I've got a problem with drugs, but I didn't. There was no point that I actually thought that. I was just so even though I'm going to this outpatient, rehab facility, as soon as I leave there, I go and I start drinking. I start drinking, even though I know that I'm going to get tested. But I would wake up and I would just drink water all day, and so that when I got my sample, it would be there would be no alcohol in it, and I wasn't taking drugs, and I wasn't smoking marijuana at this point because the marijuana stays in your system longer. But I was still drinking heavily. But anyway, I go back up now. I'm finally going up to court for this charge of assault, which I got jailed for just previously, and the court have told me that I have to leave America. So because when I'd got the gate arrest, I was the charge they were still investigating me. So this was at the final court date, and I was told that I had 90 days to leave the country, get my affairs in order, and leave. And I said, right, okay. So I said, I'm in Connecticut. My dad's in Florida. Can I go to Florida, spend the last 90 days there, and then leave? And they said yes. So the judge says yes, but because I still was on parole, that never got relayed to my parole officer. And so when I'd missed when I had to check in with them, I thought everything was okay because I'd spoke to the judge, but that hadn't been put to my parole officer, so he was still expecting me. So when I never showed up, they put a warrant out for my arrest. And they've obviously went looking in Connecticut, but I'm in Florida, and they've eventually tracked me down. So one day, I'm going out to work because at this point here, I'd resigned to the fact that I was going home, back to Scotland, and I get, I'm ready for work, and I walk out, and it's a Thursday morning, I remember it. And as I leave, my dad lives in this fancy gated community. My dad's got quite a bit of money, so you have to. People just can't drive in. There's a gate, a security gate where you have to go and you have to check in. So you could imagine his neighbours and what my dad and Pauline were thinking when you've got armed officers outside your house. And I'm not talking about one or two. I'm talking about a squad of, armed police with the badges round the neck, with guns. And as I walk out, my legs start shaking like jelly. And it's a part of me thinking run, but there's no way I could have ran, but I couldn't have got away anyway. But anyway, they've got a picture of me, they've got a picture of my car, they've got my details, and this is you. Yep, this is me. And they take me away, and they said to my dad that I should get out that day, but it turns out I didn't get out that day. So I end up going to a maximum security detention centre called Chrome in Miami. and my dad's trying to sort it out and fight it. And I thought I would have been in there for a week. Then a week turns into 2 weeks, and then basically it's either, son, you can either stay here and fight it, which you could be in here for 2 years, and if you fight it and you lose, then you could actually be in for an extra 5 years. And I said no. I said I'm not going to bother, Dad. I'll just go back to Scotland. So because the lawyer had advised that I wouldn't be winning it anyway, if I stay and try and fight this, it's going to be prolonged. I'd have to stay in the whole time, just basically go back. So I agreed. I'd signed a form saying that, just get me deported. And so I spent about 4 months in there. And then one night, in the middle of the night, they just come into my cell. They don't tell anyone. They don't tell my dad. They don't tell my mum. They don't tell anybody. They don't tell me. They just take me out my cell in the middle of the night and say, that's it. It's time to go. So then 2 armed officers, take me on a plane. They escort me all the way back to Scotland. And when I get to Scotland, the Strathclyde police are waiting for me there. And the armed officers from America give them this piece of paper. And then they leave. And the Strathclyde police take me into a room and say, right, okay, so did you get treated well? I was like, yeah. I said they were nice enough and stuff like that. And they gave me this piece of paper basically saying I'm banned from ever re-entering the United States ever again. So I'm banned for life. And at that point there, I was like, well, I thought I was home now. I wasn't planning on going back at any time soon, but I wanted to go back in the future. So I was kind of a bit pissed off. But anyway, so I'd been in jail for about 4 months, and I'm now back in Scotland. The first thing that I do is I buy a bottle of Johnny Walker Black whiskey. I get a taxi, and nobody knows I'm coming home. So I get back to my house, my mum's house. My mum's not actually there. My cousin's there. I've bought a bottle of Buckfast, which is this wine that we have in Scotland. And I'm just start to continue my behaviour just like I was before. So nothing had changed. I was again partying, drinking. I get a job, and my drinking is just out of control again. So now I'm starting to take coke again on the weekends. I'm working Monday to Saturday, but my behaviour's changed. Nothing's changed. And then I end up getting a relationship, a lovely girl. She's nice. And we've been together for about 6 months at this point. And I go and lease this penthouse. So I was making decent money, but at least this penthouse. And this was in the November, December time. And I came back to the UK in June. So I'd been back 6 months. I hadn't been in any trouble, but my behaviour was just, again, it was the same old escape, constantly trying to escape. So I get to November time, we get the place, and then in the February the following year, I have this back issue. And I'd been playing football, and I went into a challenge. But anyway, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I can't feel my cock or my balls. I can't feel my ass. My left leg's numb. And I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what's going on here? So I wake up my partner at the time, and like, I'm in panic because I'm like, I can't feel anything. And I go into the hospital. I go into one hospital. They rush me to the Royal, which is a bigger hospital. Then I have this doctor check me, and he checks me. He's sticking pins in my asshole, and then he sends me home with 4 Valium, and I'm like, so that's it. He says, yeah, it's just a muscle issue. So anyway, I can hardly walk at this point. I've got no control of my bladder or anything. I went to see a chiropractor, a physio, and they're saying to me, listen, I don't want to touch you. I think you should get a second opinion. So then I had to go private. I went private, and the doctor does an MRI. He says, we have to operate on you straight away. So the next morning, I go in for an operation, and it was called a cordia equina. So now I'm out of commission. I can't work. So I've got this new penthouse. I can't work. So what do I try and do? I have to try and make money somehow. So I said, I'll sell drugs. So I tried that. Didn't work because I would get them and I would take them. You never heard that. Don't use your own supply, or getting high in your own supply. And that was me. I was in a deep depression because at this point here, I can't walk. I don't know if I'm ever going to walk again. I'm freaking out. So I didn't want to deal with reality. So the best thing I could do was just numb it. And that's what I went to do. And I was just drinking every day now that I'd introduced painkillers. So painkillers had came into the equation now, and this was another drug that soothed the pain, and this is what it was all. It was just soothing the pain, because that's what it felt. I couldn't be sober because I couldn't deal with how I felt about me. I was embarrassed of who I'd become, what I had done. I didn't have anything to be proud of. Every opportunity that I had, I messed up. So this sent me into a deep, deep depression. I was taking the coke that I was supposed to be selling. I was drinking every single day. I was, and all by means, I should be dead, because what I was doing to myself, my body, and people were starting to get scared. My mum was starting to get scared. My dad was starting to get scared. So they done an intervention, and they recommended that I go to a treatment centre. So I got sent to a treatment centre in South Africa, and I spent 4 months in a rehab facility over there. Well, I spent 3 months in the facility and a month outside the facility with an apartment, going to meetings. And I stayed sober, but the thing was, I always had in the back of my head, just one more time, I'll just get drunk one more time. And so I ended up coming back to the UK, and I didn't drink. I stayed totally sober and free from everything for about a month, and then I started, smoking weed, and then I was because I had my back issue, I could get painkillers. So for about 18 months, I was smoking weed every single day. I was taking painkillers every single day, but I wasn't drinking alcohol. I wasn't taking drugs. But then I relapsed. My uncle had died in the January of 2011, and my uncle died, and I relapsed. I went on a big, massive bender. I embarrassed myself, embarrassed everybody, and I remember walking into an AA meeting on the Monday morning, and I was ashamed. I had this grey pinstripe suit on, so grey suit, white pinstripes. I remember it was a Monday. I was so ashamed of myself. I'd been sober for 18 months, well, free from alcohol for 18 months, but I'd still been using painkillers and weed every day. But I just felt like I'd let everybody down, because people thought, even though everybody thought I was sober, my mum thought I was sober, people thought I was sober. But the reality was, I was just masking it with another substance, which was painkillers and weed. And this was the January, and then I'm back on. So I start to finally get some type of, I'm about 3 weeks without a drink, 3 weeks without weed, and I'm still taking the painkillers. And so, but I've got no weed, no weed, no alcohol, and then my best friend dies, and this broke my heart. This really broke my heart. But his mum had asked me not to drink. She says, "Please stay strong for him, son." So, and I didn't drink. I was on this quest to get, finally free and sober. And this was 2011. And then a mutual friend of my friend who had passed, Mark was like, he was like a brother to me. But a mutual friend of Mark and I met him, and in fact, at an AA meeting, and he said, "I might have a job for you." So he offered me to come down to Berwick upon Tweed, and it was a job which offered high money as a sales job, which I was actually doing at the time. So I went down and visited it, and I was like, "Oh, this place is amazing." So my sponsor at the time said to me, "Listen, I'd advise you not to go. You're not strong enough in your recovery. Stay here, get stronger in your sobriety before you start making these big life changing decisions." And I said, "Nah, I'm taking it." The allure of the money and all this was just, too much for me. So I start this new job, and I stay sober for a short amount of time, but I'm putting myself into these positions. I'm going to the bar, I'm going to the clubs, I'm drinking energy drinks, and eventually I have this idea in my head, and it says, if you can find Buckfast in this town, you're allowed to have a drink. And I played a game with myself. So I went and searched every shop that I could find that sold alcohol to see if they had Buckfast. And eventually I found it. And then that was me again. First night drinking, and then everything started again. It just went back to the same. So every day I was drinking, and I was hiding it because nobody knew I was drinking. And my boss at the time, he was in recovery, and so I had to, keep my cards close to my chest. So I was in my caravan at night drinking, sneaking it, and I was going to work through the day, but then I was drinking at night, and and it started to progressively get worse again, until it came to a point where one morning I went in, I was that drunk that they sent me home, and they sent me home for a week, and they said, get your shit together and come back in a week. So I went home for the week, and the first thing I do when I get home is buy 3 bottles of Buckfast, and I'm away again. So by this point, I've now met the woman who is now my wife. I'm head over heels for this girl. She's, just absolutely stunning. She's beautiful. She's fun. I'm just so smitten by her. But I'm starting to get feelings for her. And I said, she needs to understand who I really am before it goes any further, because I don't want to hurt her, and I don't want to have my heart broken. So I told her, I said, listen, I've got a history of addiction. I've been to rehab, and do you want to do this? And she agreed. And she said, I'll stick by you, we'll go through this together. And, and that just made me love her even more. But anyway, I get sacked from that job, and I have to come back to Glasgow. So she's in Berwick, I'm in Glasgow, and we're doing the long distance thing. And in between, I'm pretending that I'm staying sober, but really I'm not. I'm drinking, I'm sneaking it, I'm hiding it. And eventually I get a transfer from Glasgow to Edinburgh so that I can move here and be with Jenna. So I move with Jenna, I move in with her, and at this point here, I'm not fully blown, going crazy with drink, but I'm drinking and I'm hiding it. I'm hiding it. I'm still taking painkillers, and I'm not being able to go one day without drinking. I'm even, as soon as I finish work, this is when I started to really want to stop drinking, because I loved her so much. I didn't want to ruin this, and I was fed up living how I was living. I wanted it to stop. I really wanted it to stop. And so every day I would say, I'm not going to drink today. I'm not going to drink today. And I remember one day driving, and I was fighting the like, you're not going to drink. You're not going to drink. And I was driving up to Asda, and I remember, veering. It was like it was automatic. It was like I wasn't even driving, and obviously I was. But I remember, like, promising myself I'm not going to drink, and then getting to Asda, going into Asda, and then sitting in the car park with a bottle of vodka, and I'm saying to myself, how the fuck does this happen? How did that happen? I don't want to drink. I don't want to drink. And then I said, well, I've got it now. I might as well, I'm not going to waste it. So that was a battle all the time for me. And then we get engaged, and I'm actually doing really well in my career right now. I'm the top salesman. Nobody knows the trouble that's going on inside me. I'm deeply, hating myself. I hate who I'm becoming. I'm sad. I'm depressed, and I'm miserable because I'm lying about my drinking. I'm not being, the type of man that I wanted to be. And now I'm getting married. So this is before we get married, in fact. So one day Jenna, she tells me she's pregnant, and I'm so like happy, like tears are coming down my eyes. I'm going to be a dad, and I'm saying, right, that's it, no more alcohol, and I'm promising myself I'm going to do whatever it takes, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop, even though I really didn't want to drink. And then, fast forward to my daughter's being born. I actually go to the doctors at this point. I'm saying, Doc, listen, I don't want to drink. I really don't want to. And he gives me these tablets, and I can't remember what they're called, a Camprosate or something. But I'm really desperate to stop drinking, and I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do this to her. I didn't want to do this to my new baby girl. I didn't want to do it to myself. And so when Bella comes to this world, and at this point, I'm really struggling with life. I'm struggling with everything, and it should be the happiest time of my life. And I'm just so guilty and ashamed of what I'm doing and who I am. And I promised myself, right, she's here. I'm doing this for her. I'm going to be the best dad. I'm going to be the best dad that I can be. And but again, I can't stay stopped. I might get a day here or a day there. And then eventually, I come clean with Jenna, and I tell her the truth that, how bad things are. And she is just amazing. She's so supportive. So she's trying to get me help. So we speak to the addiction services, the doctor, and I get a home detox. So I get this woman who comes out, and she facilitates a home detox where they detox me off the alcohol, and and it means that I'm not going through any kind of withdrawals or anything. So I do that, and and I stay sober but again, I can't deal with the feelings in my head. I can't deal with what's going on inside me. And that was what kept going me back to drinking. It was the anxiety, the insecurity, I couldn't be comfortable in my own skin. So again, within a short amount of time, I'm back drinking again. And then I get, one night, it's Jenna's mum's wedding. The night before it, I'm getting so wasted and I get arrested because I've got 2 knives. So I missed the wedding. I'm spending all weekend in the cells with this guilt and remorse. And when I get out, you would think that I would it would be enough but I just wanted to drink again. And this went on. So I ended up ruining my brother-in-law's wedding. I started a fight at their wedding on the December time. And, so I ended up going through, I think it was 3 home detoxes. And I'm desperate. I want to stop. I don't want to be drinking anymore. I'm working a full-time job, but again, the drinking's starting to creep up more and more and more. And at this point, I'm selling caravans at a different site. Then I moved to a different site. Now cocaine's came into it. So now I'm taking coke every single day, and then I'm drinking to kind of numb the anxiety from the cocaine. I'm smoking weed, and it's just things are just getting worse and worse. And now Jenna's pregnant with my second child. So, I'm trying to deal with everything that's going on, but I hate who I've become. I hate it. I'm so ashamed. When I can't even look Jenna in the eye, I can't even speak to people because the way I've let things spiral is just, it's just uncontrollable. I couldn't stop, even though I really desperately wanted. And then Lachlan's born, and again, I'm promising myself, this is it, and you need to sort yourself out. But I ended up losing my job because of being drunk and work. So I lose my job, and now I've got no way to support my family. I've got nothing, and this is when life just went, totally downhill for me because now I have nothing to do. I've got no work, so now I just start drinking every single day. And my relationship with Jenna is strained. She's having to take care of these 2 kids, and I'm just a piece of shit drunk at home, not really helping, getting drunk every single day, and to the point where I had to drink cheap cider because we couldn't afford anything else. And then I'm getting Jenna to go to the shop at 10 o'clock in the morning because that's when it could open, and she's having to buy this cheap cider for me, and she's in tears. And I didn't know how bad it was for her, but I could imagine. But I'm getting my wife, who I'm supposed to love, and the mother of my children, to go and buy me cheap cider every day. And then she's under so much pressure because she doesn't want to see me not drinking because of how I was so manipulating. I was, I was a selfish piece of shit, and that's, even though I know that I didn't have real control over my life, but that's the way I was. And, we're going to the doctors, and Jenna's she's had enough. I don't actually know why she's still with me because I've told her many times she should have left me. But I desperately wanted to stop. I tried to commit suicide 3 times. I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to keep living the way I was living. I had the belt round my neck, and Jenna came and caught me, and I'm up to the crisis unit. So I'm up at hospital, and then they check me over and send me. Then I'm back up again. They check me over, and I've got all these thoughts of killing myself or doing something really stupid so I could get locked up, because that's all I wanted. I wanted to get locked up. So I'm speaking to the addiction team. I've got a therapist. So these people, and then eventually, they're trying to get me a place in a rehab center. So eventually I get a place in a rehab center, and this is in 2018 now, and I get a place in a rehab center, and I get sent there for 6 months. But I'm in there, and I do want to get sober, but I'm not really taking things seriously. And then I get into an altercation 3 months in, and I get kicked out. So I get sent home, and Jenna's pissed off at this now. She's ready for leaving me. And I'm like, listen, this is a fresh start, I promise you, things are going to be good. And it wasn't long before I started drinking again, and it wasn't as bad as it was before, but as I did, I was starting to sneak drinks again. But Jenna knew by this point. She could tell by my attitude, how I spoke, my body language. She knew she was, she was on it, and she's like, "I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this." But then I get arrested again for an assault charge, and this was, uh, you know, in the December time. And Jenna had enough. She's like, "You sort yourself out, otherwise we are done." And so when I came out of the treatment centre, I signed up for a barber course, and I was on this 6-month course. So this gave me a chance to have a bit of purpose in life. I was looking forward to training to be a barber. I was started to read books like The Chimp Paradox and The Power of Now, The Secret, and I was starting to visualise my future. And looking back, this is where things started to change. But even though I was still drinking, I was smoking weed every single day. There wasn't a day where I didn't. If I wasn't drinking, I was definitely smoking weed every day. There was not a day that I didn't smoke it at this point. And so I was going to Glasgow, and I was sitting on the train for hours at a time, and I was reading these books, and I was starting to visualize me having this barber shop in the future, and and I really truly believed it, and I did. And when I graduated on the January, and I said to Jenna, so I had the qualification, and this one morning, and I'd been visualizing it for months. I'd been drawing the shop floor. I'd been researching how much everything cost. So I had everything on paper. This is why I spent hours at night, because it was distracting me from drinking, and it gave me, this vision gave me purpose. And this was, I believe, when things started to, shift a little inside me, because I wasn't focused now on the drinking, because I was focusing on building this barbershop, even though I didn't have anything. I didn't have money. I didn't have, I didn't have the certification yet, but I'd been planning this for months and months. And then when I did get the qualification, I went out one day and I said to her, I'm going to go and get the money for the shop. And she laughed and she says, how are you going to do that? But I went out and I found a shop premises, and I went and checked the price and spoke to the agent and stuff. And then I phoned my mum, and I told my mum the story, and my mum borrowed me £5,000. So that was me getting the money. So that was the January in 2018. And this was it, I was like, this is a fresh start. I'm not going to be drinking, I'm going to, do this for my family. I'm going to get this shop up and going. I'm really going to make a go of it. And I got the shop started, got it opened, and I needed a bit more than £5,000, but the £5,000 got me the tools, like the kind of seats and the paint and the wallpaper and the flooring and stuff like that. And I'd got it all, but the only thing I didn't have was the sign. But I'd also borrowed 1,000 off my dad, 1,000 off my brother. So I got the shop, and then eventually I got the shop looking amazing. And it was in January, and it was beautiful. It was really, this was in 2018. So I'd got it looking amazing. And, so this has got my new focus in. So now I'm still drinking, but not as much. But I'm smoking weed every day. Every day I'm smoking weed. I'm dabbling with cocaine again, and it's becoming progressively, worse. But I end up signing up for this challenge, which is a 28-day challenge in the gym, and you have to go to the gym every single day, and you kind of eat the certain foods, and you have to check in. And so I took this challenge seriously. And I do believe this is when things started to shift for me, because I took this challenge seriously and I won the challenge. But because I was in the gym every single day, working out, looking after, my nutrition, it was making me feel different. It was making me think different. And I was starting to believe in myself. I was starting to have more belief in myself. I was starting to have more confidence in myself. And then, even though I was still drinking, I felt better about the type of person I was becoming. And my relationship was still strained with Jenna. We were still having our difficulties, but she could see that I wanted to stop. And one day I went to church. This was like how desperate I was getting. And I went to church on this Sunday, and I took my son with me. And I had a little strange experience in the church. This woman was speaking, and what she was saying was exactly how I was feeling inside. And then my son he looked at me and he looked up and he put his hands and I cuddled him, and I just had this emotion went through me, like this was my son, and I had tears coming into my eyes, and so that was in the November time, and so that was I hadn't had a drink from that moment in the church. I hadn't had a drink, so I'd stayed sober, but I'd been smoking weed every day, and this was in 2018, so it was 2019, and the Christmas of 2018 going into 2019, and I had no, sorry, it was the Christmas of so we had the shop for a year, so this was 2019 going into 2020. Yeah, I get confused. So I hadn't had a drink from this experience in the church. And I go through Christmas. Now, I'm still smoking weed every day. I'm taking painkillers. But I haven't drank. And then I have a Christmas where I didn't drink that Christmas. And I go into the new year with these fresh intentions. This is going to be great. Everything's going to be good. So I go in, I don't drink, but I'm smoking weed, I'm taking painkillers, and then COVID hits, so we get to a point where my shop's been opened for over a year now. I've got plans of having the best year ever, and the worst thing that could ever happen has just happened. I've just been told that I'm going to have to close my shop down, and this scared the shit out of me because I didn't know how I was going to make money. I didn't know anything, and so anyway, I have to close the shop, and what in the past, what I normally have done is I would have drank myself, I would have made excuses, but because Jenna was so strong and saying, "Listen, I'm not going to hang around if you're going to be drinking," and because I desperately didn't want to drink, I'd had that like strange experience in the church, and something had shifted in me. It was hard to describe. And I didn't, want to drink. I wanted to be better. So rather than going down and feeling sorry for me, one of my friends recommended that I read the 5 a.m. Club. And funny enough, it was my best friend's brother, my best friend that died's brother, recommended this book, the 5 a.m. Club. So I started to read the 5 a.m. Club. And because I'd been working out heavily, I'd been in the gym, I'd won that challenge the year before, but I'd continued to keep going to the gym every single day. I continued to work out every single day. And then I read this 5 a.m. Club, which introduces meditation, journaling, self-development. So it's a really good book for anyone to read. It really is if you want to start, changing your life. So it's the 5 a.m. Club, so it's 20, 20, 20. So it says do 20 minutes exercise, 20 minutes meditation, and 20 minutes either personal development book or journaling. So what I done was I started to do the 20 minutes exercise, the 20 minutes meditation, and the 20 minutes personal development. So it's a 66-day challenge. So I started to do this challenge, and every day I was meditating, every day I was running, and I was also going to, because when we were locked down in my barber shop, I'd built a gym in the back because we weren't allowed to use gyms. So I built a gym in the back so I could still work out because I was really getting into the gym. But now I'd introduced meditation into my life, and the 5 a.m. Club had given me that because I'd never really meditated before. So within a couple of weeks of doing this challenge, things started to change. I started to become more aware of like scenery, flowers, spiders' webs, snails, and I started to post these positive quotes on Facebook every day because I was starting to feel better. I had this newfound enthusiasm. I was starting to look at life differently, and I could honestly feel that being in this routine and meditating, and plus I was eating healthy because we were in lockdown. I was eating a lot of fruit. I was eating good foods. I wasn't eating shit, but I was still smoking weed, and that was like, and I was still taking painkillers. So I was still on the painkillers. I was still on the weed, and it was, but I wasn't drinking. But as I was doing the meditation, I started to have a different feeling about me. I was starting to be more positive, and Jenna could notice it as well. So I done this challenge, and it was 66 days. But even before the 66 days was up, I think I was about, it must have been 3 weeks into it. So I must have been about a third into the challenge at this point, and it was a Sunday, and I have this guilty feeling because my brother had died from an overdose a few years prior, and I had this feeling that I hadn't done enough to help him. I could have been more. I could have been a better support system. I could have been a better brother, but I hadn't done enough to support him. And I had this really guilty feeling. And so I phoned my mum to talk to her because I'm quite close with my mum that way. And I explained to her what was going through. And she says, listen, son, you couldn't have done anything different. You know, he was in America, you were here. You know, you're going through your own troubles at the time, you know, and you couldn't. But I just felt guilty. So I said to Jenna, I said, I'm going to go to the shop and work out. And she's like, right, okay. I said, I'm just feeling a bit shit about Scott and stuff. So I go into the gym, and as I get in there, I put on the usual music that I listen to. But something said, nah, not today. Don't play this today. And I pick a random playlist, and it falls on a rock playlist. And my brother's a massive, he was a rock fan, played the guitar, played the drums. He was a great musician. And so I put that on. And the first song that comes on is Linkin Park. And as I put it on, I'm pretending that I'm playing the air guitar. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn to play the guitar for Scott. So I had my journal at the time. And I said, I'm going to learn to play the guitar. Love and miss you, bro. And as I wrote that, as soon as I finished writing it, I had this energy came over me. It came right through my body. And I was in tears. You know, tears couldn't stop coming. They were just coming. And the next 6 or 7 songs that played, the tears were coming. They couldn't stop. And at this point, I'm still trying to do my warm up. I'm still trying to work out through the tears because it was so surreal. I didn't know what was going on and I couldn't explain it. And it wasn't tears of sadness. It wasn't. It was like it was like something inside me was shifting. And you know, so as it went on, and I said to myself, I better move to the back because I had big windows in the front of the shop and people could have seen me. So I go to the back of the shop, and as I get to the back of the shop, I just fall to my knees and I just keep saying, thank you, God, thank you, God. And I didn't really have any beliefs of God or anything like that. I definitely didn't believe in, you know, anything kind of spiritual at this point here. But I just dropped to my knees, and then I had this voice saying, everything's going to be all right. You're going to be all right. Life's going to be good. And then I had these visions, and it was just all so surreal for me. But when it kind of finished, I didn't know what had just happened. I was so taken back. It was so surreal, but I felt different. I really did feel different. So I started to research it. I started to reach out to people who might knew, and I put on Facebook any of my friends here into the spiritual stuff. And then I got, you know, what one of my friends messaged me back. She says, yeah, she says, I know a little bit about it. So I met up with her, and she told me, she says, it's like you must have had a spiritual experience. So anyway, I go back and I tell Jenna, and she's like, you know, she didn't know what to say, but I feel different. So the next day I go and do my 20, and I come back, and I used to always smoke weed, and I said, I'm going to stop smoking weed. You know, something's calling me to stop smoking weed. And anyway, I smoked this joint, and it was like, I felt terrible after it. And I was like, you know what? This is my sign to quit. So I take the weed, I go down to the harbour, and I just throw it. I just throw it in the harbour, and I just get rid of it. And then I had to go through withdrawals for about 4 or 5 days from weed and the painkillers. But anyway, you know, so I've now removed all substances from my life, but I'm still having to deal with the after effects of it. But now I've got this new kind of belief. Something has shifted in me. Something has it's inside, and it's so strange. So I'm still going to the gym. I'm starting to meditate heavily now. And then the COVID lifts, and I'd kept my routine. I'd been doing everything great. And then I have two my clients come into me within the space of a week. And because I'd kept in touch with people throughout lockdown, and I was quite close to some of my clients, but both of them came in and said to me, they said, you know, I just want to thank you. See, if it wasn't for you, I would have committed suicide. And it was too much of a coincidence that they came in saying the same thing in the same, and at that moment I decided, you know, I want to do something more in my life. So through lockdown, I had been doing personal development courses because I was on a journey of trying to better myself. And then I'd had that kind of spiritual experience. That was about a month into it. I started to, you know, dive deep into personal development. I started into coaching. I got a life coaching qualification. I got another life coaching qualification. So this was at the end. This was after the first lockdown, and these guys came in and said to it, and I was like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do in my life. I'm supposed to help other people. So bear in mind, I've got this successful barber shop, and you know, I've no real kind of experience in doing coaching, but I had this calling to say, this is what I should be doing in my life. So without even speaking to anybody, I put my shop up for sale. And then Jenna's like, "What you doing, man?" So I come home, I told her, and she's freaking out. My mum's like, "What you doing? That's your business." My dad's like, "That's your business." And I was like, "Listen, there's something bigger that I've got to do in my life. I feel that I've got a calling. I don't believe that everything has just happened the way it's happened. I've got sober. These experiences have happened, and I had, all this kind of this excitement and purpose and passion. And so anyway, I sell the shop, and then that's in 2020, and then from there, life just gets better. From I continue to hit the gym every day. I continue to meditate every single day. But now I've got a purpose. Like, I want to help people change their life. I'm going to help people be the best version of them. And don't get me wrong, it's not been an easy road. Okay, because the last 4 years it's been ups and downs. But in that time, I've never touched a substance. I've never drank. I've never done anything. But I've also never had to, I don't think about it. I don't, fight it. I believe that I had a psychic shift. And that's when I say, like, people ask how you get sober. I don't know one thing. I think it was an accumulation of things. I think it was, get myself fit, having exercise and get my body in shape and eating the right foods. That was get me into a routine. Then you add meditation in there. So meditation was, I had to sit with myself for an extended period of time, and I was doing it more and more. So I was starting to get comfortable in my own skin. So I'd had that, and I was journaling, and then I found a purpose. And I think this is one of the biggest things, a purpose that was bigger than me, and that was to be the best father, to be the best husband, because at this point, I believed that I could, because I got sober. I had this momentum, and I'd overcame the hardest thing in my life, which was addiction. So surely I could help other people live a better life. And so I had this purpose, and I truly believed that I was here for something bigger, and I just ran with it. So I just kept, and that was 4 years ago. So on this journey, I've stayed away from alcohol. I've stayed away from drugs. I've totally reinvented my whole life. The relationship I have with my wife is, unbelievable. The relationship I have with my children is unbelievable. The relationship I have with my wife's family, my own family, my mum, my dad, my stepmom, my stepdad, everybody. And it's all the result of, not drinking. But drinking was never the problem. It was the relationships I had with myself was the problem. I hated who I was. I believed I was a piece of shit. But when I realised that when I got myself looking good and feeling good, and then I started to. So the first was the body. I had to get my body right. So I lost all the weight. I was eating healthy. So I was putting good food into my system. I was eating the right food. I was looking good. So I started to feel a bit better. Then I started to work on the mind. So the meditation. I was reading books. I was constantly learning. So I was listening to audiobooks all day, every day. So I'd be walking my dog, listening to self-help books, and that's through the whole of lockdown. That's all I done was personal development. I was focused on, understanding how my mind works. So I got the body right, then I started to get the mind right. And then I was strong enough to deal with the emotions. And then I started making amends to people, and from there I just got stronger and stronger. I got more qualifications. I started taking more advanced level coaching courses. I became a personal trainer, a nutritionist. So I was just constantly educating myself. But more importantly, I was building a relationship with myself. I was forgiving myself. I was starting to love myself. And not in an egotistical way, but I was starting to love the man I was becoming. And now, I'm super proud of who I've become. And I'm only at the beginning of this journey. But, I believe how I got sober was getting my body right, getting my mind right, getting my emotions right, and finding a purpose in life, something bigger than me. And that's my family. And also helping other people, being of service to humanity. And it's a bit of a, surreal journey that I've been on. But, would I change it? I probably wouldn't. because now I have the tools to really help other people live their best life, and I'm living my best life now. So I'm actually truly grateful for the journey, even though I've hurt a lot of people, but most people I've made amends to, and now I can use everything that I've learned to help others. And that's what my mission in life is. As you'll see it on my Facebook page, is to help 1 million people reinvent their lives. And that's why I do this podcast. That's why I do the YouTube channel. That's why I do everything that I do, is to help other people live their best life, but also it keeps me connected to my sobriety. It keeps me connected to my relationship with my wife, my children, my mum, my dad, my brother, everybody. Okay, so yeah, it's probably went on a wee bit longer than I anticipated, but listen, see if you've got any value from that, and you might find somebody else might get a value. Please share it to someone. Give somebody else, a message of hope, because I really have, been on a journey, and I've overcame a lot of things, and I want everybody to experience that. So if I can help in any way, if I can help you, reach out to me, shoot me a DM. If there's anything you feel that there's, I can shine some light on, please get in touch. And if you feel a family member, a friend would be useful from this episode, then please send it. But that's me for today. I hope you enjoyed that. Sending you much love. Ciao for now.